Hey guys, this is Dave with Gazaudio. Today I'm going to be reviewing the IKKO Heimdallr ITB03. We'll go over what's included in the box first. Of course, we have the ITB03 itself. It also comes with a USB Type-C cable, a Lightning to Type-C cable, and a Type-C to Type-A cable. Unfortunately, it does not come with a case or a clip. As for price, design, and specifications, the ITB03 is priced at $149 and is your basic portable Bluetooth USB DAC. The housing of the DAC is made out of glass and metal. It is on the heavy side, especially when compared to a lot of the other portable DACs out there. The housing is mostly glass, and it does feel and look really, really nice. However, I'm not confident that it would survive very many drops. Of course, it being glass, I also have to wipe it down constantly because when I touch it, I do get fingerprints on it. Now, as for the design itself, again, while it does worry me a little being made out of glass, it looks really nice, and the overall build quality is quite good. As for inputs, outputs, and buttons, on the top of the ITB03, we have a 3.5 millimeter output and a 4.4 millimeter output. On the bottom, we have a Type-C input, and on the side, there is a volume rocker and playback controls. Controls also allow you to navigate the built-in menu. And on the front, of course, there is a small OLED menu display. Inside of the ITB03, on the DAC side, we have a pair of AKM AK4377 DAC chips. And on the amp side, we have a Rycore RT6863 op amp. As for the Bluetooth chip, it has a Qualcomm QC5125. It also does have an NFC feature, which makes pairing fairly fast and a little easier. As for the power output, it isn't super impressive. It only has 32 milliwatts at 32 ohms out of the 3.5 and 125 milliwatts out of the 4.4. So just for comparison, the BTR7, which I recently reviewed, has 160 milliwatts at 32 ohms out of the 3.5 and 320 milliwatts at 32 ohms out of the 4.4. The BTR7 does cost about $50 more, but the FiiO BTR5 only cost $119, and it gives you 80 milliwatts of power output out of the 3.5 and 240 milliwatts out of the 2.5. So while the power output of the ITB03 is relatively low when compared to some other Bluetooth or USB DACs, it still does have sufficient power to drive all of my IEMs, and it also does pretty well with my 300 ohm Civica SV023s. I also tested for background noise with my trusty 2020 Andromedas and the Dunu Zen Pros, and basically there is none. This thing is very, very quiet, and the background is black. As for Bluetooth codecs, it supports LDAC, aptX HD, aptX LL, AAC, and SBC. The Bluetooth range is pretty good. I was able to leave my phone on my nightstand in my bedroom and walk around my house, and I never actually lost connection at all. It has a 650 milliamp built-in battery and advertises 8 hours of playback time. However, I usually get about 7. Of course, it depends on your specific use case. So if you keep it in high gain or low gain, your volume level, etc. Now, as for the built-in menu, you can access it by long pressing the power button and holding it down. Once you're in the menu, it gives you access to 4 different filter options. You can turn charging off or on. You can put it in car mode. You have your dimmer. You have 4 different listening scenarios: music, hi-fi, game, and movie, and also your gain settings. So before we talk about sound, I should remind you that pairing is important, and not only will the sound signature, sensitivity, and impedance of your IEM or headphone affect what you hear, but also the technical capabilities of your IEM or headphone will determine largely how good your listening experience is. Also, I did test the Bluetooth sound. However, I prefer to listen to music connected via USB, so most of my actual testing was done in hi-fi mode with a USB cable. Now again, the Bluetooth quality is good. I still think the BTR7 is better overall, and honestly, I still think the BTR5 has better Bluetooth quality. Like I said, the Bluetooth connection is solid, and I didn't have any issues with that. That being said, the overall sound signature of the ITB03 does have some coloration and is what I would consider to be warm neutral, which is expected of an AKM Velvet Sound DAC. So there is just a little extra mid-bass warmth and presence. Now, once you're out of the mid-bass, the rest of the frequency spectrum remains fairly linear or neutral. Treble and bass extension are good, so I didn't notice anything really missing on the top or the bottom. Okay, let's talk a little more specifically about the sound of the ITB03, starting with the bass. The bass of the ITB03 is pretty clean, but again, there is some coloration in the mid bass, and I can hear just a little bit of bass bleed into the lower mids. It can sometimes slightly reduce lower mid detail, but that loss in detail is offset by the ITB03's natural presentation, because that same warmth gives instruments and vocals a little extra body and again a nice natural presentation. It also does have good bass extension, so there is good sub bass presence for the most part. I can hear plenty of sub bass rumble, which helps to support the rest of the bass frequencies. Now, while most of what I listen for is present in the bass frequencies, I did notice that dynamics seem to be lacking slightly. So kicks and some bass notes don't seem to have quite as much impact as I would prefer. I noticed that mainly out of the 3.5, and I'm sure it's probably a result of its low power output. And now moving into the lower mids, that same warmth found in the mid bass carries through into the lower mids, again resulting in a slight reduction of lower mid detail. However, as you move into the mids and the upper mids, resolution begins to improve quite a bit, and much of that detail is restored. Now, as I mentioned before, that added warmth does lend itself well to instruments and vocals, giving them a little more body and a little more of a natural presentation. Now, as for the treble presentation is linear like the mids for the most part, and has somewhat of a smoother presentation. Now, that being said, there is adequate treble presence and treble detail. And what I noticed was cymbal strikes sounded very natural, hi-hats still maintain that good sizzle, never sounded harsh, never sounded peaky. So for long listening sessions, for me, that's kind of important because it never becomes fatiguing. As for technicalities, imaging and layering are actually really good. So instruments and vocals have good density and an anchored or defined space within the sound field. However, that sound field or sound stage is a little bit on the intimate or narrow side. It does have pretty good forward depth though. So with the exception of that intimate presentation, the ITB03's technical performance is pretty good. So how would I summarize my experience with the ITB03? For the most part, it was good. My only negative takeaway was that there wasn't really anything special about it. I couldn't find that special attribute or characteristic that made it stand out to me. Not that it's a bad device. The sound is generally good, and it checked most of the boxes for me. However, my ability to connect to music and feel engaged is determined by several important attributes, two of which is bass performance and dynamics. And it seems like in those areas, they were just okay for me. That being said, I did eventually find that connection, and for the most part, I was able to engage with the music. It just wasn't as strong of a connection as I felt with the BTR7 or again, even the BTR5 2021. So would I recommend the ITB03? Yes, but it's not a strong recommendation. It does still provide good performance features and versatility at the $150 price point. And the build quality and design are great. And again, It's right at that line where the performance is just good enough for me to give it that recommendation at this price point. So overall, again, in the end, my experience was pretty good with the ITB03. So that concludes my review of the IKKO Heimdallr ITB03. If you're new to the channel and like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further, you can also support us through our Patreon. I'll be sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review. Please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.